The joke that started it all, Jake was just a regular human guy living in a very unusual place, a giant space station called Nebula Haven. It floated quietly near the edge of the galaxy. Many different alien species lived there, working, trading, or hiding from their pasts. Jake worked at a small coffee stall on level 7. He liked simple things, warm drinks, funny movies, and peace. But peace ended the day Zellara moved in next door. Jake was fixing his old holo screen when he first saw her. She stepped out of her apartment, tall and powerful, with silver blue skin that shimmered under the lights. Her eyes were sharp, like a hunter. Her armor looked worn, but her posture was strong. Too strong for someone just arriving. Jake blinked. "Whoa," he whispered to himself. "She looks like she could snap a robot in half." He gave a friendly wave. "Hey, new neighbor." She didn't wave back. She only nodded. Jake felt a little awkward but smiled anyway. "Well, if you ever need sugar, or, I don't know, a human mate, you know where I live." He laughed at his own joke. But Zellara didn't laugh. She tilted her head and studied him like a strange puzzle. "I will remember that," she said seriously. Then she walked away. Jake stood there confused. Okay, weird sense of humor. He didn't think much of it. Until later that night. Around 10 p.m., someone knocked on his door. Jake opened it in his pajamas, holding a cup of noodles. It was Zellara, with 2 large bags in her hands. "I am ready," she said calmly. Jake blinked. "Ready for what?" "To begin our mating bond. You made the offer. I accept." Jake nearly dropped his noodles. "Wait, what?" "That was a joke. I was being funny." Zellara didn't move. Was it not a real offer? Jake laughed nervously. "No, I was just being friendly." She stepped into his apartment without asking. "In my culture, such a statement is a bond proposal." I responded in the correct way. Jake backed up. "This is a big misunderstanding." She looked around his apartment. Small, messy, but cozy. She touched the couch with curiosity. "You sleep here?" "Sometimes," Jake said. "But look, Zellara, right? I think you misunderstood." "I understand clearly," she replied. "You offered. I accepted. Now we begin the joining process." Jake sat down slowly. This is not happening. Zellara stood in the middle of his living room, calm as ever. "I have brought food, extra clothes, and a sleep roll. I also brought a gift, as tradition says." She pulled out a small glowing stone and placed it in Jake's hands. Jake stared at it. It was warm and humming slightly. "What is this?" "It's called a heartlight. It shows energy connection between bondmates." Jake gave a nervous laugh. "Lady, I don't even have a real girlfriend." "You do now," she said seriously. That night, Jake sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling while Zellara slept peacefully on the floor beside him, on her sleep roll like a soldier. "This is bad," he whispered. "Very, very bad." The next morning, things got stranger. At the coffee stall, Jake was trying to act normal. His friend Mox, a 4-eyed furry alien, noticed something was off. "You look strange, like you've seen a ghost." Jake sighed. "Worse, I made a joke to my new neighbor, an alien. Now she thinks I'm her mate." Mox stopped making coffee. "Wait, your neighbor is a Dravari?" "Yeah." Jake nodded. "Why?" Mox looked horrified. "Jake, Dravari don't joke. Their mating words are sacred. They don't lie, tease, or play games with bonding talk." "Oh no," Jake said, face going pale. "She's claimed you," Mox whispered. "You're hers now." Jake's heart raced. I need to fix this. But deep down, he had a strange feeling. A tiny part of him wasn't just scared. It was curious. Why would a powerful alien like her choose a guy like him? And why did her voice, when she said, "I accept," sound more real than anything he had ever heard? He didn't have answers yet, But one thing was clear. His simple life just got very complicated. She moves in. Jake had never thought of himself as the kind of guy who would end up in a space relationship, especially not with a battle-hardened alien warrior. He wasn't tough. He wasn't rich. He sold coffee on a dusty corner of level 7, but none of that mattered to Zilara, because she had already decided he was hers. The morning after she moved in, Jake woke up on the couch with a crick in his neck and 1,000 questions in his mind. He rubbed his eyes and looked around. His once messy apartment now had perfectly stacked supplies, a clean floor, and some of Zilara's strange metallic gear neatly arranged in the corner. And there she was, standing in the middle of the room in a silent warrior pose, eyes closed, her arms folded across her chest like a statue. Jake froze. Does she sleep standing up? She opened her eyes calmly. Good morning, mate. Jake choked on his breath. Please, don't call me that. But that is what you are, she said. You made the offer. The Heartlight has accepted. Jake stood up. Zilara, I've tried to explain. Humans joke. That was a joke. I didn't mean it. I do not understand, she said. In the Draveri language, there is no word for joke. Jake sighed and rubbed his face. Great, that explains a lot. Over the next few days, Zilara fully moved into Jake's life. She took over one half of his small apartment, turning it into a mini war camp. She sharpened her weapons every morning, exercised using a large gravity disc, and practiced battle stances that shook the floor. At first, Jake tried to ignore it. He continued going to his stall, making coffee, and pretending things were normal. But people noticed. Fast. Is it true? Asked Haldo, a chubby alien with tentacle fingers. You bonded with a Draveri warrior. I didn't bond, Jake snapped. It was a misunderstanding. Oh, Haldo said. Then why is she following you everywhere? Jake turned, and sure enough, Zilara was standing right behind him, arms folded, watching quietly. She likes to keep an eye on me, Jake said awkwardly. She says she's protecting her mate, Mox whispered. You should be careful, Jake. You can't just unbond with a Draveri. It's a big deal. That night, Jake came home to a strange smell, something spicy and strong. Inside, Zilara was cooking something in a glowing pot. He raised an eyebrow. Is that food or engine fuel? She looked at him seriously. It is a traditional meal for the bond ceremony. I cooked it for us. Jake sighed. You really believe this, don't you? She looked at him quietly, then served the food into 2 bowls. He sat down across from her at the tiny table. Zilara, can I ask you something? She nodded. Why did you really accept? You don't know me. I'm not a warrior. I'm not anything special. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Draveri choose mates not by strength, but by soul fire. Jake blinked. What's that? It's what burns inside, not outside. She paused, then added, You made a bold offer with no fear. You smiled, even when I did not. You spoke to me like an equal. That is rare. Jake swallowed hard. But I didn't mean it. Maybe not then, she said softly. But maybe your soul did. He stared at her, at the way her eyes softened just slightly, at the way her voice lowered. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a cultural mistake. Maybe it was something else. The next day, things got even more complicated. Jake had just opened his stall when an angry alien customer stormed up. A Groxian, big and mean with 4 arms and 3 eyes. You gave me cold coffee yesterday, the Groxian roared. Jake held up his hands. Sorry, that wasn't on purpose. You dare insult me with low-temperature bean water. The Groxian grabbed Jake's shirt and lifted him off the ground. People nearby gasped. Jake kicked the air. Help, he yelled. Someone. And then, like a meteor crashing down from the sky, Zilara landed between them. Release him, she said, voice cold as space. The Groxian laughed. "And what will you do, warrior lady?" In one swift move, Zilara grabbed his arm and flipped him, all four arms pinned in seconds. The Groxian lay on the floor groaning. Jake stared. "Whoa." Zilara looked at him. "No one harms my mate." Jake felt his heart pound. Not from fear, but something else. Something that felt like respect. Later that night, as they sat in the quiet apartment, Jake looked at Zilara. "Why did you help me today?" he asked. "You are mine," she said simply. "I protect what is mine." Jake didn't know what to say. No one had ever stood up for him like that before. Not even back on Earth. He looked at her, not just as a strange alien who moved into his life uninvited, but as someone who actually cared. He got up and walked to the small kitchen. Then he returned with a warm drink. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "This is called cocoa. Humans drink it when they feel safe." She took the cup and sniffed it. "It smells sweet." "It is," Jake smiled, "like trust in a mug." She sipped it slowly and gave a tiny smile. "Then I trust you, Jake." That night, as Jake lay on the couch again, Zilara rolled out her sleep mat nearby. He stared at the ceiling again, but this time his thoughts were different. Yes, this was strange. Yes, it was fast. Yes, it was totally unplanned. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a mistake after all. Things get complicated. Jake thought things had finally started to settle. Zilara had stopped calling him mate every 5 minutes. She still trained in the mornings, sharpened her knives, and watched him like a hawk. But she smiled more now. Sometimes she even laughed. He had learned not to make jokes he didn't mean, especially when it came to relationships. He also learned Zilara didn't like fizzy drinks, loved space-flavored popcorn, and had a soft spot for old Earth music, especially songs with deep, slow piano. Jake was even beginning to enjoy her company. A little too much. But peace, like always, never stayed long on Nebula Haven. It started with a message. Jake found it blinking on his compad early one morning. The screen showed only a symbol, 2 silver fangs crossing over a red flame. He didn't recognize it, but Zilara did. She stood behind him, her face suddenly pale. Her hand twitched toward the blade on her hip. "What is it?" Jake asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "It's the mark of the trial." Jake blinked. "Trial? What kind of trial?" She turned to him. "The Draveri Council has been informed of our bond. They demand that you face a challenge to prove you are worthy." Jake stood up slowly. "Wait, prove what? I didn't even sign up for this." "In our culture," she said calmly, "choosing a mate from outside the clan is seen as rebellion. To avoid shame, the outsider must prove their value. If they fail," she paused, "the bond is broken." Forcefully. Jake felt his chest tighten. Forcefully, like prison forceful. "No," she said quietly. "Like removal by fire." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry. What now?" That evening, Zilara took Jake to a secret place deep under the space station. They passed through dark tunnels, heavy doors, and finally entered an old training chamber filled with dust and dim red lights. Inside were 3 Draveri warriors in full armor, standing like statues. Each held a long staff with glowing edges. Jake swallowed. "Tell me I'm not supposed to fight them." Zilara looked at him. "You don't have to beat them. You only have to survive." Jake laughed nervously. "That doesn't sound much better." She stepped close to him, put a hand on his shoulder. "You won't be alone. I will prepare you." The next few days were a blur of training. Zilara taught Jake how to dodge, roll, balance, and strike with simple force sticks. She didn't expect him to become a warrior, but she expected him to try. "You don't need to be stronger," she said. "Just smarter. Use what they don't expect." "What's that?" Jake asked, panting. "Kindness, humor, heart." Jake blinked. That works on your people. Sometimes, she said with a small smile. By the third day, Jake was bruised, sore, and exhausted, but something else had changed too. He felt proud. He was doing something real. He wasn't running away. Not this time. Then came the day of the trial. The chamber was filled with quiet watchers, Draveri elders, station security, and curious aliens from every species. Jake stood alone in the center, holding a wooden practice staff. Zilara stood behind the circle, watching with fire in her eyes. The lead elder stepped forward. You are the human named Jake. You claim bond with our warrior Zilara. Do you accept this challenge? Jake swallowed. Do I have a choice? No, the elder replied. Well, in that case, Jake sighed. Let's do this. The first warrior stepped forward. He was twice Jake's size and moved fast. Jake barely dodged the first strike. The crowd gasped as Jake rolled on the floor, flipped up, and backed away. He didn't try to fight back with strength. He used speed. When the warrior swung too wide, Jake threw sand in his face. The crowd roared. Zilara smiled slightly. Clever. The second warrior attacked more fiercely. Jake tripped, rolled, and this time used his staff to block a hit, then jabbed the warrior in the stomach and ran. When the warrior slipped, Jake helped him up. Gasps. Murmurs. What is this? One elder shouted. Compassion, Zilara said aloud. He shows honor in his way. The final warrior approached, slow, silent, and dangerous. This one didn't attack right away. He studied Jake. Jake stood tall, breathing hard. You fight like a child, the final warrior said. Then you should be proud I lasted this long, Jake replied with a grin. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, the final warrior dropped his staff. I have seen enough, he said. The crowd murmured again. The elder stood. Jake of Earth, you have survived. Your bond stands. Zilara let out a slow breath and stepped into the circle. Jake collapsed to the floor. Please, tell me there isn't a round two. Zilara knelt beside him, smiling softly. You did more than I hoped. You proved you are not just words. Jake looked at her. You knew I could do it. She nodded. I believed in you, even when you didn't. Jake laughed. I guess that's why you're the warrior. No, she said. That is why I am the mate. That night, back in the apartment, Jake sat in silence. His arms ached. His head throbbed. But his heart felt warm. He looked at Zilara, who was now carefully polishing her armor in the corner. You know, he said, this whole thing started with a joke. She nodded. Yes, and now it is no longer funny. Jake smiled. No, now it's something kind of real. Zilara turned and looked at him. Would you make the same joke again? He thought for a second. Then said, yeah, I would. But this time, I'd mean it. She stood up, crossed the room slowly, and handed him the glowing heartlight stone. He held it in his hands. It glowed brighter than before. Your soul, she said, burns louder now. Jake looked into her eyes. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a guy who made a mistake. He felt like a guy who found something. Someone he never knew he needed. The mating bond. Jake thought surviving the Draveri trial would be the hard part. He was wrong. Because what came next wasn't a test of strength or speed. It was a test of something far more difficult. The heart. A day after the trial, things began to change. The heartlight stone Jake held now glowed brighter every time he came near Zilara. It pulsed with soft heat, like a living heartbeat. Sometimes it even reacted to Jake's emotions, turning icy cold when he was afraid or warm when he laughed. Zilara explained it gently, one evening as they sat under the soft lights of the station's artificial sunset. The trial was only step one, she said. Now the bond is active. The heartlight connects us. Jake stared at the glowing stone. What does that mean exactly? She looked at him carefully. It means our lives are linked. I feel what you feel, and soon you will feel what I feel. Jake went quiet. He had thought this was over, that things would go back to normal. But the word normal no longer had meaning in his life. So, he said slowly, we're soul connected now. Zilara nodded. You can choose to accept it, or you can break it. But that process, it is dangerous. Jake raised an eyebrow. Dangerous how? Zilara looked away. Some who try do not survive. Later that night, Jake sat alone in his room, staring at the stone. It rested on his table like a soft red star. He could hear Zilara moving in the other room, organizing her gear, humming a strange alien tune. It was peaceful, comforting. But inside Jake's heart, a storm was building. He had never been good at commitment. He'd messed up every relationship he ever had. Friends, girlfriends, even his family back on Earth, they'd all drifted away. And now here he was, being asked to join his soul with someone from another planet. What if I ruined this too? The next morning, Jake didn't go to his coffee stall. He wandered the outer rings of the station, holding the heartlight in his pocket, his thoughts spinning like the ships outside the windows. That's when a strange voice called to him from a shadowy corner. You don't look like someone who's found his true mate. Jake turned. A tall, robed figure stepped out from behind a support beam. His skin was pale blue, his eyes glowing softly. Who are you? Jake asked. I'm called Tharn, the man said, and I help people disconnect. Jake's heart jumped. You know about the bond. I do, Tharn said with a sly smile. And I know how to break it. Jake hesitated. Why would you help me? Because not all bonds are meant to last, Tharn replied. You are human. She is Draveri. You live in different worlds. Do you really want your soul chained to hers forever? Jake didn't answer. Tharn stepped closer. I can remove the heartlight. Quietly. Painlessly. No one needs to know. Jake looked at the man's hands. Thin, delicate, glowing with some kind of tech. What's the price? Jake asked. Tharn's smile faded. Your memories. I erased the bond, but I must also erase your time with her. The feelings. The connection. All of it. Jake's breath caught in his chest. Forget Zilara. Forget the laughs, the training, the strange meals, the way she protected him without question. He clenched his fists. I'll think about it, he said. Tharn nodded. I'll be waiting. When Jake returned home, Zilara was sitting at the table, her expression unreadable. You were gone, she said. I needed air, Jake said quietly. She stared at him for a moment. Then she held out her hand. Give me the heartlight. Jake blinked. Why? Because it is reacting strangely, she said. It knows you are afraid. Jake hesitated, then placed it in her hand. The stone glowed dim, faint, almost sad. Zilara stared at it. You met someone, she said, someone who told you they could break the bond. Jake looked away. Do you wish it broken? She asked softly. I don't know, Jake said honestly. I never asked for this. She nodded slowly. Neither did I, she said, but sometimes the universe gives us what we don't ask for, because it knows what we need. Jake sat down. Zilara, what does the bond mean to you? She looked up, her silver blue eyes glowing. It means I am no longer alone, she said. It means my strength is shared. My path is not just mine. It means I care. Jake stared at her. She had never used the word love. The Draveri didn't have that word. But somehow, what she just said meant more. And then, without warning, the heartlight flashed, bright and sharp. Zilara dropped it, and it hovered in the air, spinning. Jake stood up. What's happening? Zilara's voice trembled for the first time. Someone is trying to force a break. Jake's eyes widened. Tharn. The heartlight cracked in the air, energy surging out like lightning. Jake ran forward and grabbed it with both hands. Pain exploded through him. Images flashed in his head. Every moment with Zilara, from the first time he joked, to the moment she protected him, to the trial, to their shared silences. He could feel the bond breaking. But deep inside, something screamed no. He held the stone tighter. "I accept it," he whispered. "I accept the bond." The stone pulsed. The light turned golden. Then, silence. Jake collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. Zilara caught him before he hit the ground. The heart light floated down, now whole again, and glowing more beautifully than ever. Later, as Jake rested on the couch, Zilara sat beside him. "You saved it," she said quietly. "I saved us," he replied. She touched his hand. "You chose me." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I did." She nodded. "Then the bond is now complete." A soft warmth spread through Jake's chest. Not fire, not magic, but something real. Something like belonging. Danger on the station. For the first time since the accidental joke, Jake finally felt like his life had purpose. The bond was real now. The heart light glowed steady with a golden pulse. He and Zilara no longer slept in separate corners of the apartment. She no longer stood guard with a blade in her hand. She sat beside him. She listened when he talked about Earth. She even tried cocoa again, this time without making a face. And Jake, he stopped running. He stopped fearing the future. Until the sirens began. It was a low, rising howl, a sound Jake had never heard before in all his time on Nebula Haven. Lights in the ceiling turned red. The floor vibrated. A robotic voice echoed through the halls. "Security breach in docking ring 7. All non-defense units evacuate immediately." This is not a drill. Jake shot up from the couch. "What's going on?" Zilara had already grabbed her armor. She slid her blade into the sheath across her back, eyes sharp. "This is not a simple alarm," she said. "I can feel it. Something wrong. Something dark has entered." Jake grabbed his jacket and the heart light, slipping it into his pocket. "Should we run?" Zilara shook her head. "We go toward it." They moved fast. The corridors were chaos, aliens of all kinds running in panic. Smoke drifted from the docking ring. Electricity sparked from broken ceiling panels. Security bots lay in pieces along the walls. Jake stopped short at the sight. They were shredded. Zilara studied the metal wreckage. These were heavy armored bots. Whoever did this was strong. Too strong for one attacker. Maybe it was a gang, Jake guessed. Zilara's voice dropped. "No, I know this pattern. These are signs of void serpents." Jake blinked. "I thought those were just stories." "They are real," she said. "And they feed on energy. They smell heat, fear, power." Jake's heart began to race. "So, if they sense the heart light." Zilara looked at him, eyes dark. "They will come for you." As if summoned by his fear, a crack tore through the wall at the end of the corridor. And then it appeared. A long, black creature, its body like smoke and shadow, slid through the opening. Its eyes were glowing red slits. Its mouth opened wide, full of needle-sharp teeth, and it hissed with a sound that made Jake's bones vibrate. The void serpent. Zilara stepped forward instantly, blade drawn. "Run," she said. Jake didn't move. "No, I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking. The bond makes you a target." "Then let's fight together," Jake said, voice shaking. "That's what bonded mates do, right?" Zilara paused. Then slowly she nodded. "Then stay behind me." The serpent lunged. Zilara moved like a flash of light, ducking, slashing, spinning. Her blade cut through the beast's tail, but it regenerated instantly, black smoke pulling itself back into form. Jake backed away, trying to think. It feeds on energy, on power, on light. And then it hit him. The heartlight, he shouted. It's drawing it in. Zilara turned. Then destroy it. Jake hesitated, his hand on his pocket. Destroy the heartlight. Destroy their bond. I can't, he said. Zilara screamed as the serpent knocked her into the wall. Jake's heart exploded in panic. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the glowing stone, and held it high. Hey, he shouted. You want it. Come get it. The void serpent turned its gaze to him. Its mouth opened wider. The hallway dimmed as its body grew longer, thicker, darker. Zilara crawled to her feet. Jake, no. But it was too late. The beast lunged, and Jake ran straight into the cargo bay. The room was dark, full of old crates and flickering lights. Jake dove behind cover, clutching the heartlight. The serpent followed, slithering through walls, phasing through metal. It screamed, a terrible sound that echoed through every corner of Jake's skull. But then Jake remembered Zilara's words. You don't need to be stronger, just smarter. He looked around and saw the old power converter across the room. It had one button, a red one. Jake ran. The void serpent chased. Just as the creature lunged again, Jake slammed the button and threw the heartlight into the converter. The entire room exploded in blinding light. Jake woke up to silence. Soft blue lights blinked above him. The floor was cracked. Smoke hung in the air. And beside him, sitting on the ground, was Zilara, cut, bruised, but alive. The serpent? Jake whispered. Gone, she said softly. The energy loop pulled it apart. Jake tried to sit up, groaning. The heartlight. Zilara reached into her pocket and pulled out the stone. Still glowing. Still whole. You gave it everything, she said. And it gave you back your life. Jake stared at her. I thought I lost you. I thought I lost you, she said. They were silent for a moment. Then Jake took her hand. I'm done joking, he said. Zilara smiled faintly. Good, because now it's no longer a bond by accident. It's by choice, Jake finished. Later that night, after being cleared by medtechs and thanked by station officers, Jake and Zilara sat under the glowing ceiling of the artificial stars. You know, Jake said, this isn't what I thought space would be like. Dangerous? Strange? Zilara asked. No, Jake said, full of heart. She turned to him, her eyes soft. Jake, yeah. I have one more question. Shoot. She leaned in closer. Do all human jokes lead to this much trouble? Jake grinned. Only the good ones. Truth and feelings. The station had returned to silence. But silence didn't always mean peace. Outside Jake's window, the artificial stars blinked gently, casting a soft silver glow on the metal walls. The battle with the void serpent was over. No alarms. No danger. No more running. But inside Jake, something still twisted. He stared at the heartlight stone, resting on the small shelf above his bunk. Its golden glow was calm now, steady like a heartbeat at rest. And yet Jake couldn't sleep. Zilara moved quietly through the room, folding a cloth over her healing wounds. Her arm was wrapped in a thick bandage. She'd taken the worst of the serpent's attack, diving between it and Jake without hesitation. Jake sat up and cleared his throat. You don't have to keep standing guard, you know. We're safe now. Zilara didn't turn. I do not stand guard. I think. He watched her silently for a moment. The soft lights painted gentle shadows across her strong features. The same woman who had thrown herself in front of a monster without a second thought. The same woman who once mistook a joke for a bond. And stayed. Jake's chest tightened. Zilara, he said slowly, do you ever regret it? She finally turned, her eyes unreadable. Regret what? Bonding with me. Choosing this life. Leaving your people. Zilara stepped forward, her gaze fixed on his. Why would I regret choosing the only person who ever saw me as more than a weapon? Jake blinked. Is that what you were before? She nodded slowly. The Draveri raised me for war. For silence. For battle. Emotions were weakness. Love was a story we told children, but never ourselves. Jake swallowed. Then why me? You smiled, she said. And you meant it. Jake felt the weight of those words land in his chest. Heavy. Honest. Real. They sat on the floor, side by side, in a quiet that didn't feel empty. After a long pause, Jake spoke again. I've never really been in anything serious. Zilara tilted her head slightly. Not even once. I mess things up, he admitted. I get close, and then I panic. I run, or I make jokes until they leave. You stayed through the trial, she said. I almost didn't, he whispered. I thought about breaking the bond. Zilara was quiet. Then she nodded. I know. I felt it. Jake turned. You did. Yes, that night, when the stone flickered. When you met that stranger, Tharn. I knew. Jake lowered his head. Then why didn't you stop me? She looked at him with eyes full of something soft, something not often seen in warriors. Because choosing must be real. If I forced you, it would mean nothing. They sat like that for a long time. Then Jake spoke again, voice quiet. I'm scared. Zilara nodded. So am I. Jake blinked. Really? You fought a void serpent with a knife and zero fear. She smiled faintly. Fighting is easy. Feeling is harder. He let out a soft laugh. Yeah, you're right about that. Another pause. Then Zilara reached for the heartlight and placed it between them. It is not just a bond tool, she said. It is a mirror. Jake looked down at it. A mirror. It reflects the truth. What we don't say. He watched the glow flicker softly, then flash blue. What does blue mean? He asked. She paused. Loneliness. Jake looked up. She was staring at the stone, not at him. He reached forward and touched it gently. The blue shimmer faded, replaced by soft orange. And that? Jake asked. Zilara whispered, hope. Later, they sat at the small table, drinking warm earth tea and a strange Draveri soup Zilara swore would help Jake's sore muscles. Can I ask you something? Jake said, playing with the edge of his cup. You may always ask, she replied. When you thought the bond would break, what were you most afraid of losing? Zilara took a slow breath. I was not afraid of losing your strength, or your skills, or even your protection. She turned her gaze to him. I was afraid of losing your kindness. Jake's throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to him before. Not in all his years on Earth. Not in all the meaningless relationships he had half-started and abandoned. Not once had someone chosen him for his kindness. And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a joke that went too far. It was fate disguised as a mistake. The next morning, they walked together through the now quiet halls of Nebula Haven. People stared at them with new eyes. Not in fear, not in confusion. In respect. Some even nodded. A few saluted. Zilara was a known warrior. But now, she was more. She was bonded. And Jake, he was no longer just the human coffee guy. He was the one who survived the trial. The one who faced a void serpent with nothing but courage. And something more powerful than a blade. Loyalty. They paused by a large window overlooking the stars. Tell me, Zilara said quietly, on Earth, what do humans do when they choose someone for life? Jake chuckled. Well, we usually say something awkward. Then we give them something small. A gift. A promise. Zilara looked at him. Do you have something like that? Jake dug into his pocket, pulled out a thin silver ring from his old coat. It had no special powers, just a plain earth metal loop. I don't have a fancy sword or a glowing stone, he said, placing the ring in her palm. But I do have this. It was my mom's. She gave it to me before I left Earth. Said I'd know who to give it to. Zilara stared at it. What does it mean? It means I'm not running, Jake said. Not this time. She closed her hand around the ring, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, then I will keep it forever. That night, the heart light glowed the deepest gold Jake had ever seen. Not because of magic, not because of fate, because the truth had been spoken. And love, whether human or alien, had finally found its voice. My alien mate. Jake never expected to become a symbol. But ever since the Void Serpent attack, people on Nebula Haven had started treating him differently. Aliens of all kinds would nod when they saw him. A few even bowed. Others asked for stories. Some just looked at him with quiet respect, then looked at Zilara with something like awe. She was no longer just a warrior, and he was no longer just a human who told a joke. Together, they had become something more. Jake stood in front of the same small coffee stall he used to run on level 7. He smiled as he poured steaming drinks into cups and added whipped cream on top of Mox's favorite brew. The four-eyed furball alien sniffed the air and grinned. Still tastes like peace and trouble. Jake chuckled. Glad some things don't change. Mox looked over Jake's shoulder toward where Zilara was standing, not in armor, but in simple, elegant robes, her long warrior braids tied back. She ever put that blade down? Mox whispered. Jake smirked. She puts it down. She just never puts me down. Later that day, Jake and Zilara were invited to the Central Hall, the largest chamber on the station. A ceremony was being held in their honor. Jake tried to say no. I'm not into all that attention stuff. But Zilara gave him a look. You faced death. You deserve to be seen. So he dressed in the best outfit he owned. A clean jacket, dark slacks, and the necklace Zilara had crafted from void serpent shards. It hummed faintly with energy. Zilara stood beside him, tall and regal, the silver ring he gave her now resting on a chain around her neck. As they walked into the hall, the crowd stood. Hundreds of voices clapped, whistled, and chanted in dozens of languages. Jake almost turned and ran. Zilara grabbed his hand. Stand tall, she whispered. You are mine. And you're mine, he said softly. Guess that makes us even. The elder of Nebula Haven, a purple-skinned creature with 6 arms and a voice like a soft flute, raised his hands for silence. Jake of Earth, the elder said, you have shown courage where others fled. You bonded with a warrior who walked alone. And together, you became more than 2. You became whole. Jake shifted uncomfortably. Oh, thanks. I guess I did okay. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The elder continued. By the traditions of the Dravari and the laws of Nebula Haven, we recognize your bond not just as accepted, but as sacred. The heartlight was placed between them, its glow golden bright in front of everyone. Zilara reached out first, placing her palm against it. Jake followed, placing his hand over hers. The glow deepened. A pulse spread across the room. And for the first time, everyone could feel what they felt. Warmth, trust, connection. Not forced, not faked, chosen. After the ceremony, Jake and Zilara returned to their apartment. They were quiet, not because of tension, but because of peace. Jake sat by the window, staring at the stars. Zilara joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. You were not born for battle, she said softly. Nope, Jake replied. I was born for burnt toast and bad coffee. She chuckled, a real laugh, soft and rare. And yet, she continued, you changed my war-filled path into something lighter. Jake thought for a moment, then said, you ever think, none of this would have happened if I hadn't made that dumb joke? She smiled. It wasn't dumb. He turned to her. No. She shook her head. It was the first truth you didn't even know was true. Jake let that sink in. Later that night, Jake pulled out a small box from under his bed. Inside was an old scratched music player. His mom had given it to him before he left Earth. It only had a few songs, but each one carried memories. He pressed play. A soft piano melody began. Slow, gentle, full of quiet strength. Zilara tilted her head. "This is beautiful." Jake held out his hand. "Dance with me." She raised an eyebrow. "Travari du mat." "I know, but maybe just this once." She took his hand. They danced slowly in the small living space, moving carefully, awkwardly, his steps too light, hers too sharp. But somehow, it worked. Somehow, it was perfect. The next morning, a message arrived. It was from Earth. Jake opened the holoscreen, surprised to see his sister's face after so long. "Jake, I finally tracked you down." The station's news got all the way back to Earth. "People are talking about some guy bonding with a warrior alien. Is that you?" Jake grinned. "Depends. Is he handsome?" Zilara leaned into the screen and said, "Yes, he is mine." His sister blinked. "Okay, that's... wow." Zilara stepped back, and Jake laughed. "We're good," he said. "Better than I've ever been." His sister nodded. "I'm proud of you, Jake." He smiled. "Me too." In the following weeks, Jake started a new kind of business, not just coffee, but stories. He called it Starlight Tales, a place where people could drink, talk, and share across cultures. And Zilara, she trained young warriors, not just in battle, but in heart. She taught them that protection wasn't just fighting. It was choosing to stand beside someone. Jake watched her from afar sometimes. She was still fierce, still silent, but now she smiled more. And whenever their eyes met, the heartlight pulsed. Always. One evening, as they sat on a hill overlooking the star docks, Jake pulled something from his pocket. It was a new ring, crafted from a mix of earth metal and Travari crystal. He handed it to her. "I know you already have one," he said, "but this one's for tomorrow." Zilara raised an eyebrow. "What is tomorrow?" Jake took her hand. "Our joining day," he said. 1 year since I told the dumbest, best joke of my life." She placed the new ring beside the old one. Then she whispered, "My mate." Jake smiled. "My alien." And so, the boy who once joked without thinking, and the warrior who once walked without feeling, chose each other. Not because of fate, not because of magic, but because when the stars aligned, and the bond burned brighter than fear, they saw each other fully. And they stayed together forever.